Let's go, shall we? Today is the 8th. You guys know what today is. I know that some of you do not have access to the KD files. Some of you do, right? There is a date in the KD files. August 8th. Actually, July 24th, July 28th, August 8th. These are inbound waves. So today we undergo one. It actually began about 26 hours ago. And we're going to see what comes of that. The one I'm worried about is one that happens between August 19th through August 29th. And the reason why is because we have an issue with something I coined, the water event. So let me brief you guys on the water event real quick if I can. We have a problem in the poles, right? We have a bad issue in the poles. And the tar sand team, of course, some of you may be familiar with that. Some of you are. One of you guys were on that team. But they had to do something else. The reason why is because this eastern ice shelf is starting to give way, right? It is a big area. It's a huge area. The glacier will likely fall within a year's time. Any time within that year's time, it's going to give way. Probably less than that. What happens when this falls? Because of the size of this ice sheet, it'll cause the ocean to rise by 20 feet. That's not a hypothetical. That's not a theory, right? That's not what this is. That means water would rise worldwide, and all coastal areas will be affected, right? Every single last one of them would be affected. So that it's really losing grip on the seamount. It's starting to shuffle, and with some of this inbound energy, it always causes thermal spikes in the ocean every time that happens. It's almost like a thermal spike inside the earth, which in turn heats up the bottom of the ocean floor. And in this case, that continental shelf that's holding up this ice sheet is heating up. It's going to cause it to give way. That means I'm praying it does not happen this way, but in the dead of winter, that thing could give way. That's not a very good time for that to happen, right? Just so you know, they started tracking this in 2004, right? Back in 2004, there was a date projected based upon current melt times. It was supposed to be until, it was absolutely going to go by 2030. Well, everything is off the table because the Earth is going through these hyperthermal events. So that's an issue. I'm going to keep my eye on it. Within the website itself, I'm going to keep everybody updated on that. That's not something very safe to talk about, right? It's not very responsible to talk about. Here's why. This will really cause a lot of fear, right? If you continue to talk about this. I'm going to keep people updated. People can handle the information as they please. But as far as COT is concerned, we need to keep everybody updated by writing, all right, with lots of data. I want to keep you guys updated by data, neatly organized data, so that you guys can also verify, see the data, verify the data, and begin to track it yourselves. That's very important. With a surprise water rise, there's no real indication to anybody. There's no time for anybody to get ready for this. There's no time for that, right? The water is not going to flood the earth and stay that way forever. That's not what will happen. It will actually disrupt the coastal cities, coastal areas and low-lying areas. Then all of a sudden that water will sell out and withdraw, right? If the moon maintains its orbit, we'll have those, predictable conditions. But I have to remind you, we live in very different times, right? We are soon to undergo a solar system shift, an entire shift of our solar system. You're not really going to notice it first, except to say some stars are going to be out of alignment. You'll notice that way. You're not going to notice it by, the earth shaking to pieces or anything, not immediately. But that's where we are. These things we have to track very delicately and responsibly. I can't emphasize that enough, responsibly. What will happen if any of this is sensationalized? People will grow numb to it, right? They'll become numb. If people become numb to this, they're not going to have any indication. Most people won't have an indication internally that this event will absolutely take place, and it'll cost lives. If we do it responsibly, right, then it'll be a better warning when the time comes. Okay, a much better warning, and people will likely take heed to that warning. But if the internet is saturated with all this stuff, they're not going to listen, right? They're going to end up being near coastal cities when they don't need to be. And if anybody is looking for governmental entities to warn them about these events, you can forget that. You can forget it. They wouldn't do that. That's not in the best interest of anybody to do that. China has already taken steps. Russia has already taken steps. If you take note of Russia, they have pulled a lot of people back from that permafrost is melting, the tundra that they have to deal with. They pulled people back from that. They've actually made room in their cities for that. Now, a lot of what they're doing is overshadowed by this war. A lot of it is. A lot of what China has done for their people is overshadowed by conflict and war and political differences. But they're going to try and save a large group of their people, right? Consequently, it's always good for you guys to have your own opinions, right? Take in all the information you can, but have your own opinions about these nations. I would not rely upon propaganda to interpret what these nations are, because that can sour you internally, right? There are people over there in all these places, just like you. Governments fight. Governments throw propaganda back and forward. But I'm telling you that the people, right, they are just like you and I. They're just like you and I. So remember that, because the world as a whole faces some very strange events, right? And today, consequently, we're going to talk about the 3 storms we have to endure. We're all living, we're all here. One of the storms has already begun, one is forming, and it's about to get worse. One of them is unbelievable, and it's something that people normally don't prepare for. It is a spiritual storm. I'll describe that today, based on, it'll be based on biblical context, and something that continues to rise, right? Something that continues to evolve, you could say. Something people are dealing with, right? We have a storm in the heavens we're going to have to deal with, which is going to scare people from the onset. But it won't do anything. It's going to scare people. It won't do a thing. It's going to scare people and cause people to act very archaic. It's going to scare them first. We'll have the impact later, but it will scare them, right? If you're prepared for that, you won't be frightened by what you see. You'll have an understanding of what you see. And that's key here, to have an understanding of what you see. If you are prepared spiritually for the spiritual storm, you won't fall apart at the seams when it happens. Most of the populace has no defense against any type of spiritual activity that would all of a sudden rise, right? They have no defense from that. They have none. You do, they don't. And that makes you a very special and critical component during that time. It would be a blessing if all of us could be in position prior to this time, prior to things actually happening. But you're witnessing a big portion of this spiritual storm happening right now. And it's very sad to say, but it's affecting the body of Christ in a very negative way. not a positive one, right? We can change that. We just simply have to identify it, remind ourselves of what the Lord said. Remember the anchor of his prophecies, not based on theory, right? Not based on any of those things, but based on his truth. To be fully prepared for that. Okay, we have to be fully prepared for that, right? You guys have to, your discernment has to be opened up. Your discernment opens up when your personal agendas fall away. Because how many of you have felt, I don't want to say confusing, but almost like a spiritual block? Anybody been feeling a spiritual block? Something is in the way of your spiritual innocence. Let's put it that way. Something is competing for your spiritual attention, right? Something is. There's a component that obviously has grown in the earth. It's becoming stronger. It's opposing what you first had. And if you're not careful, it's all consuming also. Now, the average person cannot see this. They live their lives based upon these spiritual intruders, right? They're living their lives based on this. Many of them are going to be lost. We talked about some of that last night, about the falling away, and it's a very serious event. Everything changes when people begin to succumb to it. You guys don't have to succumb to it. What you do have to do is see where you are. In all honesty, see where you are. You don't need to make up anything. You don't need to act like you're okay. Any of those things. No. Because, see, at some point, we're either going to believe in the Lord fully or not. There's no such thing as halfway, believing halfway, right? And if we act on our faith in truth, we're going to have the results of the Lord. Who wants the Lord's results versus their own results? I want the Lord's results. It's not a science project. You know, we don't set up an experiment and say, let's see if the Lord is going to respond this way if we do this. Never do that. That is tempting the Lord our God. We don't do that. We simply obey in obedience. Now, some people cannot have faith to see the ending of a situation in a positive manner. Would you be surprised if I were to tell you that is not the totality of faith? It's not. God controls the results. God fulfills his own promise. We need not worry about him fulfilling his promise, right? We have to be authentic in our steps that we initiate. It's not even by our power we continue to walk. It's not. It's by the power of the Holy Spirit within us that makes us able to continue in our quest to walk. In the day we're living in right now, a lot of people are drifting. They're really drifting. I know personally in prayer, it's almost like a warning that comes up on a continuous basis that people are drifting, not that they mean to, right? It's not that they're greedy or looking for things. It's just that sometimes our defenses, our spiritual defenses are down through a multitude of things that we face, right? Issues that we look at and attempt to resolve. And all too often, we are mentally consumed by activities external the Lord's walk in our lives. And we have to have balance. Balance is key. Finally, the last storm that people are going to have to deal with is the reality of prophecy. And the reality is quite deadly. But always remember, what's happening in the earth is happening for you, for the believers. None of it would take place if you did not believe. Do you guys know that? If you did not believe, none of this would take place. There would be no need for none of this to take place. Never forget that. All these happenings that have been prophesied to happen, all of them, from our government, right, to the state of humanity, to what's happening in the earth and above the earth and within the earth, right, all of it. All of the changes that are happening within you, within your mind, even the struggle of staying in the Word of God. even the temptations that are right there at the door of the house of God. All of it has been set in motion for our sakes. This is a time of growth, of us truly breaking free, overcoming all darkness, not some, all, right? All of it. Okay, everybody, guess what? We are live, and it is working. Okay, we're good to go. Let me adjust this. Give me a second here. Good to see you guys today, and hope that you guys that are in the Hawaii area, many prayers going out to everybody in Hawaii and some of the other places that will soon begin. Unfortunately, these are unfortunate times, and when the reality of these times, whether by nature or other means, we live in very different times, extraordinary times actually, but for the most part the weather has been extreme. Temperatures have been extreme. And unfortunately for all of us, the fires, they will continue. They will. I think it was a couple weeks ago we talked about fires in America, correct? A couple of weeks ago. And it's not foresight, really. It's not what it is. It is because the temperatures are so extreme, right, that naturally, with some of the dry points and some of the attempts at pre-burning certain areas, the temperatures are so hot that pre-burning just doesn't do any good, and it can actually begin to take off. And so those folks in Hawaii, Japan, they're still on that list. You guys do realize that. Anybody out there in Japan, cruel fires is what they are. Cruel fires. Because they destroy lives. They do. They misplace people. I'm very sympathetic to people with both flooding and fires. They misplace people and destroy things, destroy lives. And it's very unfortunate. We live in those times. But a lot of people will not take heed to it. And it will continue. It will continue. There's no guarantee that a place is safe from those fires. No guarantee. Japan, those of you in Japan, be cautious, because soon we're going to have to deal with cities burning. Lots of cities burning. That will not be enjoyable, right? That's a displacement of quite a few people. And just not a good thing. The Gulf is a tinderbox. Not in the Middle East, but in America. Europe is a tinderbox. Italy is a tinderbox. And, these places are eventually going to go up. They're going through phases for certain materials in the soils, in the plant life, dying, drying up, dying. And then these, you have certain controlled burns that are going to go wrong. Atmospheric incursions are going to cause fires. Storms will cause fires. Fires from natural causes and otherwise. And because of the heat that we've been experiencing, right, this is one of the first years that people are actually paying attention to the heat, and it's only beginning. It's only beginning. Now, of course, the Lord is merciful, isn't he? So if we get a moment of reprieve, it'll likely come by way of a volcanic eruption. Any volcanic eruption of any size will actually begin to cool the planet. Do you guys know that? And this, looking back in the geologic record, the real record, not this made-up one that they support evolution with, but the real record. Every time the Earth has gone through these heat phases like this, it's also volcanic eruption followed. I believe that volcanism is one of the main drivers of what we're seeing right now. Volcanism is. And it's amazing that now they will not report temperatures of other planets. They won't do that. Because if they put that out, that ruins part of the ideology they have going right now. But they will report volcanoes, right? Eruptions on Mars, eruptions on Earth, eruptions on these other celestial bodies, and the moons that orbit those celestial bodies. They report that. If you can track that, you begin to see what something is happening here, because the eruption trend follows that of Earth. But why? Because it does follow that of Earth. It means that what's happening is not Earth-centric. It's not just happening to Earth. It's happening all over the place, which means we have an external force that's actually changing or altering conditions in our solar system. It's very easy, right? Just follow that. I believe that God makes all information available that you can actually utilize to help you discern what's real and what's not. I believe that. I believe it's all in plain sight, really. It's just that your sight is often guided to look in specific directions, right? Add some excitement into a conversation or something like that, and all of a sudden your attention goes in that area. Just stay level-headed, sober. Try not to get excited, and look at the entirety of the picture, and you'll have a sense as to what's happening to everything, right? Beyond any hype that anybody would ever give. Whether that hype come from me at a very exciting moment or anybody else, right? You'll be able to see a very sobering picture of what's happening to everything all at the same time. And because we do have external causes, and these volcanism is happening all throughout the solar system, and various changes dealing with certain pulls upon these planets, right? We know that some large external force is acting on our solar system. And it's not the first time, right? Amazingly, the geologic record actually records what the magnetosphere was doing all throughout history. Because certain rocks and certain minerals are magnetized, and they do, in fact, turn themselves, we could say, in certain directions. And if you go looking in the geologic record, you can see that the Earth has gone through a few phases, right? Nobody's expecting the Earth to actually physically change its rotation, but it will. The rotation of the Earth is going to change. It will change. And, well, all bets are off then. But it happened 4 times before. Do you guys know that? 4 times. 4 times, east and west, they were reversed. Nobody ever discusses that. Part of the reasoning behind that is, if they were to discuss that, it would throw everybody off concerning history, right? Especially some of these historic documents, because you would find out that they were talking about the West, and when they talked about the West, they were actually talking about the East, which would then cause places to be in whole different continents, right? And that would just mess everything up. Don't worry. The truth is going to be shown to everybody in time. In time, everybody's going to know the truth. Right, we'll all know the truth. That's why I never get hung up on anything I'm missing. I tend to deal with today, right? To be thankful for this day, to deal with this day, and to handle those things given to me in this day. But the way we look at history is flawed in a big way. But the Lord will straighten that out. And people have used that to their advantage. They really have. Entire kingdoms and philosophies have been built upon the paradigm that things have been steady like they have been for a long time. Well, that's not the truth. But don't worry to not get into any of that stuff, right? Because then you end up with a round or flat earth type argument. You end up with people saying that the Middle East has not always been the Middle East, and Egypt has not always been Egypt, and China has not always been China, which, by the way, is true. But it's not worth it. It's not worth it. What we have today is good enough right? The Lord made it so that we can discern things of this day. If we'd only begin to trust what he gives us spiritually. I know in my life, right, I have been whopped over the head plenty of times because looking at the data will tell you one thing. God will have revealed to you the truth spiritually. And if you ignore that, going with the physical evidence, you'll end up being wrong every single time.